Do not adjust your television. What you are about to experience is stranger than fiction.
Hey there, strangers, and welcome to Stranger Than Fiction. We're going to be talking a lot about Stranger Things.
Oh.
There's going to be so many times we're going to say stranger, I'm going to be tired of saying
Stranger danger.
stranger. Today's going to be the start of something unique.
This is the start of something new.
I don't
High School
know.
Musical?
No. Never saw it. Don't know what you're singing. No, if you are listening to this in the future, hello from the past. But Stranger Things 4 just dropped, so we thought we would actually take it all the way back to the first...
Upside down.
Oh. Take it all the way back to Season 1, Episode 1, and pretty much go through the first season of Stranger Things, because if you're not aware, the inspirations behind Stranger Things is ridiculous and vast, and it's going
real?
Well, that's
We'll get there.
that's what this podcast is all about, is, you know, how much of it do you actually buy into, how much of it is maybe that's not quite how things happened, or I don't believe that at all. But in order to get to some of the meat of it, we're going to have to talk about something called the Philadelphia experiment. If you're familiar with how this ties into, I will say, other projects or other government facilities and things, you'll kind of understand why we're starting here. If you're not, you're just going to have to kind of come along for the ride, because...
We're going to Philly!
I mean, there's a ship that is, and then very much so not going to Philly. It's transferring from Philly. But we are going to be going through all 8 episodes of the first season.
Not today.
Not today. We're just doing episode 1 today. But normally, you know, we would kind of jump around and do other movies and shows. And I'm going to try and say, like, let's try and do pretty consistently, for the most part, these 8 episodes in order, so you get really a big idea of the whole picture of the inspiration for Stranger Things.
And if you don't like Stranger Things, sorry, not sorry.
There's still some really crazy real-world stuff that is worth sticking around for. Just promise me, as I've gone down this rabbit hole, I'm like, what? And what? Oh my goodness.
Side note, I've thought about getting the 11 tattoo on my wrist right here,
What?
where she has it.
Would you do 11? Or would you do a different
well, because
number?
11 and 27 are my lucky numbers. Ooh, I would do 27.
Yeah.
You're giving me tattoo ideas. Oh, no.
No. I mean, that one's not too big, but... So, yeah, if you are watching Stranger Things 4, amazing. We're only in, like, the 5th episode.
Yeah.
We haven't finished
We
volume
just watched the
1.
epic one. If you know, you know.
But we will eventually figure it all out. If you have not watched any Stranger Things, this is a perfect place to jump off. We will do our best not to spoil other seasons. We'll try.
I was like, I'm gonna go through something real detailed. So.
Well, we'll do our best. I can't promise anything. We may make allusions. We will try and be as subtle as we can to the wonderful epic. We both enjoy it, so hopefully you do too. And without further ado, let's get to
Heidi's dissection.
So we start off with a really crappy facility. This shows the outside and doesn't look really inviting. And we're inside, and the lights are flickering, and you see this guy, kind of dressed like a doctor or a scientist.
He's got a lab coat.
He's got the lab coat
He's
on.
obviously a scientist.
And so you see him running, and it looks like he's trying to get out of the building from something. And, you know, you've got, like, the sirens sound going off, and all the lights are flickering, and it's spooky. So he gets on the elevator, and he's, like, waiting for whatever it is to, like, appear, right? And so he's, like, trying to push the elevator door to close, and you hear this wonderful sound editing. I love the sound of the creatures in the show. It's like that...
It, like, gurgles. Yeah.
And you hear that noise, and he looks up, he realizes it's above him, and then it pulls him up, and it eats him, or does other things with him. We don't know, because it's off screen. So... Now we flash to the boys, our 4 boys here. We've got Will, Byers. We have Mike Wheeler. Lucas. I don't know Lucas's last name.
Sydney, something like that. I think it starts with an
Sitwell?
S.
Sitwell?
No, I thought it was. Anyway.
Lucas and Dustin.
Dunstan checks in.
I don't even know Dustin's last name. Wow.
Dustin doesn't need a last name. Dustin is.
So they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's these 4 best friends playing Dungeons and Dragons in Mike Wheeler's basement. It's really cute. And Mike is the dungeon master. Is that the name?
Yes.
Okay.
Or DM.
Oh, sliding into your DMs. Okay.
Nope.
So,
what? He's like 11.
DM sliding into you.
What?
So
That is not the dungeon they're talking about.
Mike is the host, and he says that a demigorgon, love the word.
The Demogorgon! We're in deep shit.
Demogorgon is about to attack them. And so Will Byers, who is adorable, I absolutely love him. I've loved him since the first season. I love him now.
Yeah.
He rolls the dice and they go astray. They go off the table. And so they don't know what they've rolled. And so
he needs a 13 to either hit or kill the Demogorgon.
Yes. And he takes a chance. He listens to Lucas. Lucas is yelling, "Fireball, fireball, do the fireball." And so he takes a chance for the group rather than saving himself, right? And this is all in the game. Yeah. So they're looking for the dice to find out what he'd rolled. And Mike's mom, Mrs. Wheeler, love her, interrupts and says it's time for her friends to go. And Mike goes up and he's like, please, it's only been 10 hours. I didn't know they played this long or it would take this long. And she's like, what, 10 hours? No, they need to go. And so the boys start to go. There's a leftover slice of pizza, and Dustin, being the sweetheart that he is, he goes and offers it to Mike's older sister, Nancy, who's on the phone chatting away. And he just goes, "Nancy, you want a slice?" And she just gets up and shuts the door in his face. So rude. So rude.
But what I do like, and this is one of those shows, and there's a couple shows that, like, you get an introduction or you get an idea of a character and you start to form judgments and you're like, oh, let me put them in the box. Oh, she's the bratty older sister. Mm-hmm. And then the show deliberately kind of inverts some of those expectations and I don't want to say subverts, but does a good job of them maybe fleshing out the characters to a way that you're like, oh, maybe they aren't as bad or as quite as simple as I thought they were.
Yeah. So Will is the last one in, so the boys all get on the bikes to go home and go their separate ways from Mike's house, and they turn on their lights, and there's a really great part where the light in the garage flickers for a second after they all leave. Mm-hmm. Really love that. And so Lucas is the first one he's the first stop as they all riding their bikes together. It's really cute. And then it's Dustin. Dustin's the next one, and then Mike has to go home alone. And so why did I say Mike?
I don't know.
Will. Sorry. Will. Will is the last one. He's the last house, and everyone else has left him at this point. So Will's riding his bike, and he sees a figure that scares him, and he falls off his bike into the woods.
Well, you were in a musical mood today.
Always in a musical mood. So he sees the figure, and he decides to run home. Well, the figure follows him home, creepy AF, and he's like looking for his mom and his brother, and of course they're not home. So he grabs the phone, he tries to call them, the phone isn't working, and so he goes into the shed in the backyard. I would have stayed in the house.
The shed had the gun though.
Oh, right. So he goes to the shed to get a gun.
He's trying to load this rifle.
It, and you feel his anxiety, and a light bulb in the shed turns on, and it goes really, really bright, and it's like burning so bright, and then it goes off and Will is gone. Mm-hmm. It's great because you don't see what took him or what happened to him. He's just gone.
Where's Will?
So now we flash over to a chief named Hopper. We love Hopper.
Chief of police.
In
case you were thinking like it's an indigenous chief.
No. So we flash over to Hopper's house, and there are a lot of cigarettes and empty beer cans laying around. He's passed out on the couch, and the news is playing about how power outages and surges are happening throughout the city, and they don't know why.
Turning now to local news, we're getting reports of surges and power outages all across the county.
Yeah, it's just a little flash on him. He gets up, gets ready, takes some pills with his beer in the morning while he's smoking a cigarette.
One or two cigarettes
in the shower. He's a mess. So anyway, so that's him going to work. Now we focus on Joyce and Jonathan Byers. So Joyce Byers is Will's mom. Jonathan is his older brother. And Jonathan is making breakfast.
Well, you got to mention that Joyce is played by...
Oh, Joyce is played by Winona Ryder. Love her. Want to be her.
The show does a wonderful job of taking a lot of, I would say, very prominent 80s actors and then putting them in the show. But for me, Winona, just so many moments where she just really steals a lot of scenes.
She's amazing in this. She's so good. I think this is like her best role.
Like it's just, she does a very good job as this character and this mom who is just both, I'm not gonna say unhinged, but like
she got a lot going on in her life.
She has she's trying to raise 2 kids, single mom. There's clearly a lot of baggage she has, but she is just doing her best to be like, damn it, find my son.
Just find my son, Hop.
So Jonathan, the older brother, is making breakfast, and Joyce is like, well, go get your brother up. And so they go to Will's room, and he isn't there like they thought. So they call around, and it turns out Will is missing. So now we flash to the middle school where the 3 boys pull up because Will is not there. Again, they would normally all park their bikes together because they're adorable. So they pull up to the middle school, and some bullies come up to them, and they're mean to them. Hate them. They just, they call them freaks and make them do stuff. And yeah, they're just mean. So now we fast forward to the high school where Nancy, Michael's sister, the bratty sister, and her bestie Barb are talking about Steve, her new boy toy. And Steve, by the way, is adorable. I love Steve's hair. Steve's hair is what makes him. I love Steve's hair.
I have nothing to add to that. I don't understand the obsession with Steve's hair, but I'll let you have it.
So Steve and Nancy go to the bathroom, and they're making out, and he's like, let's meet tonight. And she's like, nah, I gotta study. And he's like, no, but let's meet tonight. And she's like, yeah, no, really, I have to study. And then finally she's like, okay, we'll meet to study.
Meet me at Dearborn and Maple at 8 to study.
Yeah, okay. Now we're fast forwarding to the police station where Joyce is there looking for Will.
Well, yeah, like the Chief Hopper is like just kind of rolled into work,
grabs a donut, typical cop. So she's looking for Will, and she tells Hopper, like, you got to find my son. Like, this is not like him. He's not like you. He's not like me. He's different. He's good. We have to find him. This isn't right. They do a lot of hopping around, so I apologize if this seems very choppy. So now we're at the crappy facility again with someone named Dr. Brenner. He is Dr. Brenner. He's got white hair. He's an older gentleman.
And no scar on his face.
Yeah, okay, that doesn't matter at this point. So we're in the facility with Dr. Brenner, who's getting hazmat suited up, and he gets a gun, and they go exploring, right? So the whole reason they're exploring this facility is something obviously went amiss. This is clearly his facility. The doctor we saw in the first scene was eaten by something. Something has escaped. So they go into this area, and it's really like kind of dusty, or there's like particles in the air, and the lights are flickering, and it's dark, and you can just tell like it's just heavy in the air. And they go inside, and they see a nest or like a heartbeat or like a portal door. It's like beating like a heart.
There is a fissure in the wall, and it has almost organic material that is either kind of trying to...
It looks like it's breathing.
Yeah, it's almost like, is the wall trying to heal, or is this organic material kind of growing around it? You can't really tell. It's very alien, almost like in nature. It's unsettling.
It's gooey.
And the sound design again is just like, you just kind of feel the visceral nature of this weird disturbance.
So while they're looking at it, Dr. Brenner mentions that there is a missing girl. And they flash to a girl shown in hospital clothes.
With a nearly shaved head.
Yeah, with a nearly shaved head. She looks kind of boyish. And, she's obviously very, very scared. She runs into a restaurant named Benny's Burgers. That's a story for later.
Shout out to Benny.
And she goes into the kitchen, and she steals some French fries. And, of course, Benny goes and is like, how dare you steal from me, boy? Like, he captures her, and he realizes, like, oh, this is like a frazzled kid who's gone through some stuff. Like, let me help her. So now we flash to the nerdy science teacher, who we love.
Sorry, boys. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it came.
Do we even know his name?
I forget.
Oh, no.
So he has a radio communicator that he purchased for the boys, or he told them about it.
So I assume that this is the AV club, so he probably had allocated in the budget this new technology.
Yeah, and it's pretty fancy because it can talk all the way up to Australia.
Yes.
That was a really bad Australian accent. Can you say Australia?
Do you eat kangaroos for breakfast?
So he shows them the radio communicator, and they're super excited. They're like, oh man, Will's going to love this. We can't wait to show it to him. And the police show up, and they're like, hey, we need to speak to Dustin, Lucas, and Mike.
Dun, dun, dun.
And obviously it's about Dustin, and they're all talking over each other.
It's about Will.
Will.
Stop
I'm the
calling him
worst.
every other character.
Yeah, so they come in to ask them when they last saw Will, and they talk about how he was on Mirkwood, and they're like, Mirkwood, that's not a real road. And they're like, yeah, no, it's from Lord of the Rings. I mean, The Hobbit. And
I was going to correct you.
Yeah. And so they tell him the real road name, and so they like, okay, let's go look there. So a great flash happens where Joyce is looking for her son in the woods. They have, I'm assuming, like not too far off in their backyard, they have a fort called Castle Byers that Will has built. It's really cool. Like, it's a really nice setup.
Yeah, it's kind of like in lieu of a tree house, it's like a ground house. Like, it's a bunch of like branches have been set up in this little area, and it's a cute little fort that he has.
Yeah, and it's a flashback of her going in and talking with Will and being just really cute mom and son back and forth. And it's a hard cut to the empty fort where she's looking. So it's really sad. It's a really good moment. Then we cut back to Benny cooking burgers for 11, and he tries to find out why she ran away.
Well, and he finds out her name.
Yes, so I was getting to that.
I'm sorry, you just started calling her 11.
So he sees her tattoo that has the number 11 on it, and she tells him that is her name. So he goes off and he calls like the police or protective services. You know, he wants this little girl taken care of, right? He doesn't know if her parents abused her or why she ran away from a hospital, but clearly she's in need of some help. So the fan is bothering her, 11, while she's eating, and she decides with her mind, she just kind of looks at it and then reaches her hand out, and then the fan stops. So she controlled the fan with her mind pretty much. So we're alluding to 11 has superpowers.
Telekinesis.
Yeah, that's what I want. So the police are looking for Will on Mirkwood.
Looking for Lucas?
They're looking for Wood.
Looking for Dustin?
And they find his bike in the woods, and so they bring it to Joyce, and obviously it's not good news because they haven't had any success. They just bring the empty bike. Joyce decides to call her ex-husband, Lonnie, to see if maybe, Will went there, or maybe he took him, and unfortunately she doesn't get a hold of him. She gets a hold of his new plaything, who's like she sounds like a teenage girl, and she's no help. So dead end there.
Joyce mentions to Hopper that Lonnie does not get along well with Will, that Will is a quieter child, probably pretty sensitive in nature, as well as some other things, and there's some choice language, unfortunately, what his father thinks of him. So it was unlikely that Will would have gone to Lonnie, but they had to kind of, make sure they crossed all those barriers.
It's 99 out of 100 times kid goes missing, the kid is with a parent or a relative.
So while Hopper dropped off the bike, he decides to go look in the shed in the back, and he
does some pretty good detective work. Like, you get an idea at the beginning that he doesn't give a shit about being a cop, about being the chief. He's strolling in without really even caring about like a missing child. He's just very not involved. And then he starts doing some actual impressive like detective work where he's like noticing like there's this like dent where the door would have been swung open, and he's like trying to like piece together like, okay, he might have gone to the shed, might have done this, might have been like, gone under or pulled through there. Like, and you actually do get an idea of, maybe he's not so disheveled and broken as we thought, or
there's a reason he's in the position he's in.
Yeah, he does have some skill, like he's not just a fool.
Yeah. And so he goes into the shed and he turns on the light and he sees, that the bullets were out for the gun, and he's looking around, and it's this really good, again, sound editing moment where you can just hear the pressure of like the room, and then all of a sudden the light goes out.
Does the light go out, or does the other cop just like step in?
The light goes out.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just a nice little jump scare moment. What was that? Now we're back at Nancy and Mike's house, and Mom won't let anyone out because, a kid is missing. And she's like, no, I'm not going to let you guys outside. And of course, they get in a fight about it, and Nancy throws a fit, and she goes upstairs because Mike mentions that she just wants to hang out with her new boyfriend, Steve. And the dad is so useless in this. He's just...
I aspire to be
No.
as useless as Ted Wheeler, the dad. But my favorite is, like, the mom gets pissed at him
for
and
not
everybody
intervening and helping.
Yeah, so pretty much like everybody has left the table, like Mike stormed off, Nancy's gone, the mom's mad at Ted, and Ted just goes,
what did I do?
What'd I do?
What'd I do?
And it's amazing because he just keeps eating. He doesn't even like say what I do and like try and go up and go after her. He just keeps eating.
Yes. And so now Hopper has put on a search for Will in the woods at night. Got the local communities to come out and help him. So the science teacher's there with him. And Hopper mentions that he has a daughter. And we later find out that she actually passed away a couple years ago, which is really sad. Now, Mike and Lucas sneak out of their houses while Steve sneaks in to study with Nancy.
Lies.
Yeah. Now we're back at Benny's. A woman shows up claiming to be social services, and Benny lets her in, and she kills him because she's coming here to collect 11. I know, sad moment. So 11 starts to run away, and two guys corner her in the kitchen, and she blows them up with her mind.
Which I think they don't show.
They don't.
Like, all of a sudden they just like cut back and like they're just on the
their
ground.
heads are bleeding and they're dead.
Yeah.
It's great.
But you get a great sense because you had the little scene earlier with her telekinesis that you know that she has powers, and then you're starting to see
the extent.
Yeah.
Like, could she be the thing that's escaped and is killing all these people?
Dun dun dun.
And so the three boys, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin.
Why can you not name these children?
Mike, Lucas, and Dustin are searching in the woods for Will. And Nancy and Steve are playing strip study in the meantime.
Are they really? Or was Steve just trying to make that happen?
He was being a horn dog.
Yeah.
He wanted it bad.
Yeah. Nancy
She's like,
Nancy
my
was
parents
like,
are here. And he's like, really? I can't see them. I'm like, you douche.
But she's like legitimately like studying, doing a pretty good job, even with Steve's shenanigans.
So, it's a really sad moment where Joyce and Jonathan are choosing a picture for Will's missing poster. And they both start crying about how they could have prevented this if they'd been there, instead of being at their jobs where they were. And the phone rings and interrupts them.
The mustard yellow phone.
It's a beautiful phone. I love that phone. So Joyce goes over and answers the phone, and all she hears is breathing. And she knows it's her son's breathing, as I would know if my daughter's
and it's kind of like
breathing.
staticky and weird. It's like a weird radio interception.
And she can hear that it's Will's breathing, and she tries to say, Will, where are you? Where are you? And then you hear the beautiful creature sound, the gurgle, and the phone shocks her and dies.
The phone does.
Yeah, the phone dies. Not her.
The phone did not shock Joyce to death. We know it is in one episode. That's
the
it.
phone dies. And then the boys are still looking in the woods for Will, and they stumble into 11. They find 11 there in the rain. And that's where the episode ends.
Yeah. So you get introduced to a lot of characters, and just as kind of a very quick breakdown, so you have the four boys, which to me are very much kind of like, the four hobbits of Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of homages, and we'll get to a lot of that, but you have these four boys who I would say are the central figures. You've got 11 and her kind of mysterious circumstances with the facility. And then you have kind of the extended families right now with the older siblings of Jonathan and Nancy, Nancy's boyfriend, and then some other like ancillary characters like Barb and the science teacher who we love and we can't remember his name.
Sorry.
But it's in my opinion, a strong start. I think it, and again, in a moment I will get to some of the behind the scenes stuff, but there's a lot of, I would say these first...
His name is Mr. Clark.
Oh,
Scott Clark.
Did you look it up?
I did.
In these first, would you say 2, maybe even 3 seasons, that it's much more, Stranger Things is much more like Amblin movies, like very Spielbergian.
Yeah, and like E.T.-esque.
And so
but actually spooky.
There is it, and just like a lot of Spielberg's films, there is this idea of terror, but not necessarily, I would say, horror, if that makes sense. That there is something to be afraid of. There are things that are scary, but it's not outright like horror and gore.
Yeah.
Whereas, to jump ahead a little bit, by season 4, the kind of like Harry Potter, you have a gradual darkening of the tone as the individuals are growing up. They are facing new threats that are even scarier and darker.
It's more gory.
Yes. So if that's something you're worried about, this starts out, I'm not going to say tame, but I love very much like Spielberg is they don't show the monster too quick. Is that there is, and to your point, you don't really know who or what the monster is.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a humanoid figure that you've seen.
Yeah, so you don't even get, it's all in shadow. Like, you don't even see a hand or a face. You just see a silhouette and kind of the presence of the monster. And I really do think it's a very solid first episode.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm not going to say like the best pilot, but for us, it was very much like, okay, yeah, we'll figure out like what's going on with this. And, you know, now all these years later, we're still wanting to figure out some of the questions that have yet to be answered. So before we get too far, on a scale 1 through 10, how many secret government facilities would you give this episode?
You said out of 10? I would give
1 through 10.
10. I loved it.
I'm going to give it a 9.
Boo.
Well, you always do that nonsense to me.
I give it a 10 because I loved it. It's a great show. You should watch it.
Yeah, if you've been on the fence for some reason, you know, whatever reason you didn't feel like, maybe I'll watch it, I would suggest it. If you like monsters, if you like horror and a little bit more of the traditional or Spielberg sense of it, and you don't want like real straight up gore, we're not gore hounds, so this is really just perfect for our avenue.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like scary.
I think it could to certain audiences, and I'm not gonna say this is or isn't scary to someone, but I don't think it's too much personally.
Yeah, like it's family friendly.
No. What? There, in the first episode, you had 2 men sitting in a pool of blood after someone exploded their brains.
It's PG-13 friendly.
What? It's PG by like 1983 standards, before the rating system. So, without further ado, let's move to Behind the Screen. Can you at least scream after I've done saying Behind the Screens?
No.
Okay. So this was released, and I believe all of them dropped at the same time.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much Netflix's weird broken model. But this was released on July 16th, 2016. And the very first thing I want to talk about is something that I know you already know, that I had to mention to you yesterday, because when I found this out, it blew our minds. So, a little quick side note, we used to live in Atlanta, that some of you may be aware of that. So, we've done some movie tours, we've seen some, like, film locations. So, that's always, like, fun, that we're like, and we'll watch movies and be like, oh, that's definitely Atlanta. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and sometimes we can even very much recognize exactly where these shots are. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, there is a location in this first episode, and granted, this was filmed and released before we moved to Atlanta, but that I literally drove past every day to get to work and had no idea. And it's Benny's Burger Restaurant, or Benny's Burgers, and it's actually Tiffany's Kitchen on Lee Road in Lithia Springs, Georgia. And
like, we literally drove that all the time. Like,
yeah.
I even was like, oh, it looks like a little podunk cafe. And I was like, maybe we'll go there one day. Not even realizing that it was Benny's Burgers. It's so crazy.
So every day, back and forth to work, I was driving past this. No idea that this was a filming location. So
we'll got to go back and go get a burger.
Nope.
I'll wear a shirt. This is Benny's Burgers. Make it really awkward.
No.
Never going back?
Speaking of Benny's, I want to give a little shout out to our friend Benny, who I've always said should make his own restaurant. I think he could make a real-life Benny's Burgers. That'd be really fun.
Got a deal.
All right, so talking about Dr. Brenner, I was going to say his other name, but I didn't want to reveal too much of future episodes, so we'll just go with Dr. Brenner. He is played by Matthew Modine. We have to look these up because I don't recognize him, but he's also in The Dark Knight Rises as a character called Foley, and he's also in, do you remember the movie 47 Meters Down?
Oh, yeah, I loved that movie.
He was also in that as Captain Taylor. Again, we only saw it once, and I don't remember him offhand.
That would have been like 2 seconds. It would have been the part where they got in the shark cage.
I'm just letting you know he's
I loved that movie. We should watch that again.
We also have Karen Wheeler, who is Mike and Nancy's mom. She is played by Cara Buono. She also plays Edith Banner, who is Bruce Banner's mother in the 2003 Hulk, Ang Lee's Hulk, if you remember that. Did you ever even see that?
I did.
I'm surprised.
I've seen them all.
And you might know this. I've never seen this show, but she's also Faye Miller in Mad Men. Does that mean anything to you?
She's Faye?
She is Faye.
Wow.
I don't know what that means, but yeah, thought you would. And then last but not least, our favorite dad, Ted Wheeler.
What'd I do?
Is played by Joe Crest. He's also in Hunger Games, Mockingjay Part 2 as Mitchell.
What?
I have no idea who that
look
character
this up.
is. Also, he's apparently an Ant-Man as a character named Frank. We have to rewatch these and find Ted because Ted is worth it alone. So this episode takes place November 6th to November 7th, 1983. I mention that because I really love when production does a great job of being very specific about timelines and dates and details. Case in point, and this, we're not going to spoil too much, but there was a detail in season 4 that someone pointed out that references the first season because they're very specific about dates, and it's amazing and adds so much. But I also loved that in season 4 they don't bring up, like, that isn't heavy-handed. They don't bring it up. It's if you know, you know, and it's brilliant. So we're post-Halloween. We're, you know, still kind of dark and scary autumn time in the Midwest. It's 1983, and throughout the years, they obviously, then the years get a little later as these characters grow up. When they're introducing the four boys, like you said, they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. This is actually an homage to E.T., and I don't know E.T. super well, because if you've seen our video on what movies scared us when we were kids, I was scared of E.T., so I've only seen it a handful of times. But the protagonists are also introduced playing Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, E.T. is one of the things that popularized D&D, only for it to later be demonized by the Satanic Panic, which ironically is now being explored in the 4th season.
I thought that they were playing Monopoly in E.T.
From what I've found, it is D&D. We'll have to just rewatch it again.
Very cool.
So talking about nerdy things with fantasy features, Will talks, what's Will's password? Do you know it? To get into Castle Byers?
I forget.
Radagast? Yeah.
It's Radagast.
Oh, Radagast.
If you're a Tolkien nerd, you'll know that's reference to Radagast the Brown. I love Tolkien, but I'm not a huge nerd, so I don't know if he was introduced in the Silmarillion or the Untold Tales, but he is not in the Lord of the Rings, or if he is, he's a very small part. He is the brown wizard in the Order of the Wizards. So in the hierarchy, there's the white wizard Sauron, Gandalf the Grey, and then Radagast the Brown is kind of the third in the order with 2 other unnamed blue wizards. So I'm a big fan of Radagast. If you saw the Hobbit trilogy, I'll spare anyone my thoughts on that, but Radagast is in, I think in the first one, maybe some others. I never even saw the third part of that. So, but yeah, Radagast was a fun little, it's, you know, like Mirkwood.
Yeah, it's cute. They like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and
the Hobbit.
And you get that a lot, that there's a lot of love for some of this. So clearly the Duffer Brothers, who were the writers and creators and directors of this episode, were had to be some pretty big nerds themselves. I imagine played D&D, read Lord of the Rings, and probably felt a lot of the frustrations and pressures that these characters did. But you can tell that love of nerddom comes from a really cool place. So when Joyce is calling the Wheelers, you'll notice that the Wheelers are all sitting around a round table, and that is straight out of Poltergeist. And so you've only seen like Poltergeist like once.
Yeah.
But there is like that's straight from Poltergeist, and then they also in that flashback you have Joyce talking about taking Will to Poltergeist. So again, another Spielberg film. You have references to E.T., Poltergeist, and then Jaws. So you can tell that, and I think there's a debate to be had on
there's
how
a
much
Jaws poster in one of their rooms.
There's something else that's.
Oh, okay.
There's also, so when Hopper meets with Joyce, he is typing on his typewriter or stenograph or whatever, just like Chief Brody.
I was thinking of that.
When he's like, shark, attack. It's like missing, and you hear the keys punch, and it's like straight shot. That's a direct reference to Jaws. So,
love Jaws.
Yeah, so great. And I know there's been some criticism as like, well, I think Stranger Things goes beyond doing homages to just straight up copying. I think if you don't necessarily notice it, it's just brilliant swiping. So fun little foreshadowing. So there is a newscaster, I think it might be with Hopper, where they're talking about, and like now for the weather, and they're talking about a storm coming in.
You might want to stay home tonight or at least pack an umbrella. We turn to everybody's favorite morning weather guy, Charles.
Then in the distance of the Byers' home, you see that storm. Then when Joyce is electrocuted by the phone, then you hear that thunder rumble. Those are obviously all foreshadowing to the storm that is coming. And if you know about the Upside Down, you know it's kind of a perpetual stormy world there.
I love storms.
So if you notice when we first meet the kids, that Mike is actually wearing a blue sweatshirt and gray sweatpants. That'll be the outfit that 11 wears throughout most of the season.
Oh.
Yeah. So cute little costume design there. When we're first seeing Hopper's trailer, there is a copy of The Old Man and the Sea sitting on the table. And if you're familiar with this book, it's all about an aging fisherman who is very unlucky. And so clearly that foreshadows a lot of the bad luck that Hopper has. One thing that I noticed when we were watching is if you look at this shed, the Byers shed, right above the door, there is a horseshoe. So horseshoes traditionally were put above all sorts of places, any entrance, with the idea that you had to have them up like a U because that contained the luck. If you have them upside down, all the luck falls out. And above this shed, the horseshoe is actually upside down, an indication that, not only is Hopper's luck, bad luck, but also, the Byers have experienced this bad luck there. All right, and last but not least, we have when Will and Dustin are on their bikes, they challenge each other to a race, and Will says that he wants Dustin's X-Men number 134. This was actually a part of the Phoenix saga, and in it, a telekinetic Dark Phoenix teams up with the X-Men to defeat Mastermind by pinning him against a wall with her powers. If you understand, you understand, but brilliant little illusion there. Again, wonderful foreshadowing. And it's really a lot of those tiny details in some of the shot choices, the story choices, the tiny details that are sometimes explained and not explained, that I think this is a really brilliant show. And speaking of which, the moment that I've been waiting for, I don't know if you've been waiting for, I'm very excited. We're going to talk about
the truth.
Much as you try to bury it, the truth is out there.
So, do you know anything about the Philadelphia experiment?
Nope.
You've never heard of it, never any idea?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you this story. It's not going to be very evident on how this connects to Stranger Things until the next episode. This is going to just sound like a really weird occurrence until you'll see some of the connection next time, but I have to start with this one in order for us to get to some of the greater craziness that is the Montauk Project.
Okay.
So I want to start with a series of what are definitely true statements, and then from there we get into what is debatable. So we're going to start with what is factual, okay? So this is true. On January 7th, 1943, Nikola Tesla died of heart failure alone in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. Soon after his death, Tesla's safe was opened and all of his papers and other property were impounded by the U.S. government. Dr. John G. Trump was the main government official who went over Tesla's secret papers. And before you ask, yes,
Oh, God.
he is related
Oh,
to
God.
Donald J. Trump. He is actually his paternal uncle.
This is like a Back to the Future Biff Tannen thing.
No. Well, I mean, we could go over the weird Baron Trump conspiracy, but we're not going to. But I just want to, before anybody asks, like, wait, Trump, that's kind of an unusual name. Yes, they are indeed related. Trump was well known as an electrical engineer who was serving as the technical aide to the National Defense Research Committee of the Office of Scientific Research and Development. In the end of his life, Nikola Tesla was getting very interested in what people called a death ray or beam and particle weaponry. It is true. I think I do want to go over like Tesla's death ray at some point.
Yes,
I think that would be fun.
I gotta know.
But we're not doing that right now. But it is kind of important that Tesla was exploring non-traditional ideas. He was very interested in transferring energy wirelessly through some way.
Like Willy Wonka when he shrinks Mike?
Kind of. I mean, I would say more like wireless internet.
Oh, I like my version better.
But think of like wirelessly transferring energy. Like it's almost like, even more than just like conductive charging, some way anyway. So that's all true. So also true was Albert Einstein was very interested in what's called the unified field theory. So if you know about physics, quantum mechanics, all that, there are a lot of different forces that operate in the universe, electromagnetism. So a long time ago, they discovered that electricity and magnetism are connected, and that's why you have electromagnetism. And then you have gravity and strong and weak forces. And what's the problem with science is you don't have a theory that unites all of them. So you have quantum mechanics that describe how things operate in very small, tiny levels. You have the theory of relativity, which Einstein discovered, which talks about the gravitational pull of enormous bodies of space. But you don't have something that explains but why, how do they work together? And so the holy grail of a lot of science is trying to discover what's called the theory of everything, or the greatest theory, or the unified field theory, whatever you want to call it. Albert Einstein was very interested in trying to discover this because, he had discovered the theory of relativity, and then you had this emerging branch of quantum mechanics that was essentially disproving or causing things to be really messy with his wonderful theory of relativity. So he was very much interested in trying to find that unifying theory. Albert Einstein and Tesla are allegedly involved in this. And with that background, it might make sense that they could be involved. That's why I present these things.
Okay.
So in 1943, they wanted to do this experiment. This was a military experiment, allegedly. There's not really a definite explanation as far as what the experiment was trying to test. There's a lot of different theories or what some have speculated or some have claimed that they were trying to test. So among those, some say that the U.S. military was trying to find ways of bypassing Nazi radar during World War II, and they were going to use electromagnetic fields to do that, to try and bypass this radar, almost become invisible to radar. Others suppose that there were researchers who were preparing magnetic and gravitational measurements on the seafloor in order to detect anomalies, supposedly based on Einstein's attempts to understand gravity. So you had the theory of relativity and his studies in gravity were trying to kind of, explain or help with this experiment. So in that version, that second version, you also had that there were secret experiments on the Nazi side to find anti-gravity, and that those experiments were allegedly led by Hans Kemmler. So you've got, super secret Albert Einstein, and I believe he actually did have some involvement with the Navy. So it's not far-fetched to believe that there was communication, at least with Einstein. Don't quote me, I'm not an expert on this. He might have been involved with the Manhattan Project and Oppenheimer. I'm not sure, but it's not absurd to believe that possibly Einstein would have been involved with this. Tesla at this point, though, is dead. He died in January. Keep in mind that Tesla has died in 1943 for the next time, because, again, things start to get wacky, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So these unspecified, unnamed researchers, so you have the U.S.S. Eldridge, which is designation DE-173. It was outfitted with these generators, supposedly in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, hence the Philadelphia experiment. That's where we get the name. So testing originally began in the summer of 1943, and it was successful to a point, but it had very limited success. So one test resulted in the Eldridge being rendered nearly invisible, with some witnesses reporting a greenish fog appearing in its place, but the crew members complained of severe nausea afterwards. So they might have had some success in doing this invisibility experiment.
Yeah, but they screwed up their workers.
It gets worse. Also, reportedly, when the ship reappeared, some sailors were embedded in the metal structures of the ship.
Oh, shit.
Including one sailor who ended up on a deck level below than where he was, and his hand had been embedded in the steel hull of the ship, as well as other sailors who, quote, went completely bananas. So you had this weird experiment that might have partially turned the ship invisible, but in the process also is transporting people on different decks and then also fusing them into the ship itself.
This is real?
We'll get there.
I was like, I gotta see pictures.
There is also a claim that the experiment was altered after that point by the request of the Navy, limiting it to essentially they wanted to create stealth technology that would render the Eldridge or any ship completely invisible. So it's like, great that you had some success and, some casualties, but we want to push this a step further, and we want complete stealth of this ship.
Not a good idea.
So some say that the generators weren't properly calibrated, which is why you had some of these weird anomalies that happen, and they decided that they wanted to repeat this experiment probably multiple times. But the big famous one, again, there is some debate as to when this happened. Some say it was October 27th. Some say 28th, 29th. A lot of what I've found is commonly is 28th is the number that a lot of people use for this. I would say the experiment proper, what most people think about when they're thinking about the Philadelphia experiment.
I like the 27th.
I know. So at roughly 1705 to 1720, if you're not familiar with military time, that's 5:05 p.m. to 5:20, the Eldridge not only became invisible, but it disappeared from the area in a flash of blue light and then teleported to Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away. It's claimed...
In the water?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad it didn't just go on land.
It's claimed that the Eldridge sat for some time in view of men aboard the U.S.S. Andrew Forsyth, whereupon the Eldridge vanished and then reappeared at the Philadelphia site where it originally was. It was also said that the warship itself went back in time 10 minutes. So at this point, do you believe this?
No.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to see. You're like, wait, men getting fused into the ship hull? What? Okay, where's the pictures? It's not quite done yet.
Pixar didn't happen.
So many of these versions of this tale include descriptions of serious side effects. Again, it kind of varies on where you hear these stories of insanity, of these fusing to the ship. But that's really common when this is told, as well as other things. You know, people rematerialized inside out when the ship reappeared. Others vanished completely, and pretty much an explanation as far as like why no one's really come forward is essentially that the military then brainwashed everyone who was a part of these experiments to cover up for it.
What?
Which sounds absurd,
But I wouldn't put it past them.
But if you're familiar with MK Ultra, maybe that's not the craziest thing. And we'll hopefully find a chance to talk about MK Ultra one day. But the question is, where did all this come from?
For real.
So the story
and why hasn't it been repeated?
So the story of how this broke out or came to light is almost as weird as some of the stories that allegedly happened. So in late 1955, an anonymous package marked Happy Easter, again, late 1955, I don't know the exact date, but I'm pretty sure Easter is past, was sent to the U.S. Office of Naval Research. It contained a copy of Morris K. Jessup's book, The Case for UFO, Unidentified Flying Objects, filled with handwritten notes in its margins, written with 3 different shades of blue ink. It appeared that these 3 different individuals were almost debating with each other in the margins of this book. Only one of these voices or writers, authors, is given a name, and it's Jemi, Jemi. They commented on Jessup's ideas about propulsion for flying saucers, they discussed different alien races, and they expressed concern that Jessup was too close to discovering their technology. So, who wrote this and who sent that?
Aliens.
Aliens. Well, shortly after, in January 1956, the author began sending a series of letters to Jessup. So the
Wait,
book.
Who's Jessup?
Jessup is the author of the book.
Okay.
Then, so he wrote this book on UFOs. Someone else or 3 other people then were writing in the margins and then sent this book with all these notations
To the military?
to the Navy.
Oy.
So then this author starts writing letters, same handwriting, same thoughts, whatever, to the author Morris Jessup. And they started using both their given name, which is Carl M. Allen, as well as other names like Carlos Miguel Allende. But pretty much Allen alleges that he was a witness to this experiment on the U.S.S. Andrew Forsyth. So that's where the bulk of this comes from, is Carl claimed that he witnessed this aboard another ship, and that's how we kind of know of these experiments or experiment. How you feeling?
That's weird.
So, moving on to I Want to Believe.
Now I'm a believer.
Do you believe it?
Maybe.
Okay.
I've got a healthy skepticism.
Let me make that skepticism maybe a little healthier. So let's add a few more facts to this that might change some people's minds. So in March of 1999, the sailors who actually served on the Eldridge was a real ship. It was. They all reunited and then told the Philadelphia Inquirer that they found the story really amusing, especially because the ship never docked in Philadelphia. The Eldridge was never in Philadelphia at any point during that timeline. So that kind of throws a few monkey wrenches. Now, there's some who believe these theories or experiments, and they have some justifications as well. If you look at the shipping and where they were traveling, it's possible that maybe at this point in time, the 2 ships could have seen each other. But the fact remains, the key point of this is it happened in Philadelphia, which this ship never even was part of. That's also corroborated by the ship's deck log and the war diary, and all of that shows that from August to December 1943, Eldridge was never even in that area. One theory that I think is possibly explaining why or where some of this came from is personnel at the 4th Naval District have suggested that the alleged event was actually a misunderstanding of routine research during World War II, at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. So it doesn't even maybe involve that ship, but maybe some things that were happening in that shipyard that pretty much they would do what was called degaussing on the ships. And it was pretty much a process of trying to make the ship unmagnetic. So Nazi magnetic mines could not be attracted or attached, thereby rendering these ships, quote, invisible to mines. So it's not that they were visibly invisible, but more, from a technological... Yeah, so like when they say, a stealth bomber is stealth, well, it's not literally becoming invisible, but by radar, it's undetectable. So it could be that, you had individuals that heard, we're going to make this ship disappear or become invisible, and then you kind of grew from there. What I've read about Carl Allen and some of his writing, which is very sporadic, and it sounds like an individual who's suffering from schizophrenia, who has some delusions of grandeur, who probably someone that may have needed to see some help, and was just kind of writing. A lot of times you get paranoia, they think in conspiracies, they think the government's out to get them, they think they're secret experiments. All of that sounds like a mind that may not have been as healthy as it should have been. And then things kind of blew up from there on, you also have people who want to believe in some of these outrageous things. I do too. I think it would be crazy if this was real.
I was like, there's no way.
There's too many problems with the timeline. There's too many just basic things that this doesn't even get right for me to really give much credence to it. But this is only the beginning. So hang on tight, because the Philadelphia experiment may not sound like it connects much to Stranger Things, but just you wait. We've got a whole season to go through, and it only gets crazier from here.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know it's fun to want to believe these things.
Of course I want to. And
I even want to believe that maybe it's not as crazy as
well, just if it was real, how come it hasn't been repeated, and how come we haven't advanced in that technology? And I was more curious about the people getting fused to the ship. I pictured Davy Jones, how they're partly with the ship, but not Barnacle.
I know you didn't see it, but there was the Cloverfield paradox pretty much did that exactly. So I feel like they very much tried to write a story or a movie very similar to the Philadelphia experiment. So let us know if there's some key details that we missed that you think really adds to the story of how this works. But thank you so much for joining us. If you're not familiar, we do have a Patreon. So the Patreon actually goes over some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that we do for both our YouTube channel, Channeling Spirits, as well as this. So if you'd like to, know what's coming up next, some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, you're more than welcome to support and join us, because viewers like you is how we keep this show afloat.
That was very PBS.
See? What? No, but the afloat? Huh?
Sponsored by viewers like you.
Yeah, well... So thank you so much, guys. Stay tuned. We've got more Stranger Things coming up, and I cannot express how much nuttier it gets. So,
oh dear,
I'm excited.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm done. Over.